BruCast is back, baby.
This BruCast episode is brought to you by the BruCast Store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Visit now bru-cast.com/store. Link below. Alright, welcome to another BruCast episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. BruCast also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, BruCast on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Links on the description below. Our guest today is Simon Fokt. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much for the invite.
Well, thank you very much for being here. It's an honor. We scheduled this episode when, it's been a while. So one of the first topics that we talked about that I'm extremely interested in is the simulation theory. Simon, are we living in a simulation?
I just love that you asked about this straight away, man. It's just like one of those things, one of those topics in philosophy that people get so wound up about because it's just like, I don't know, it's one of those situations in which people really seem to care, even though it's such a theoretical thing. So yeah, I think we live in a simulation. I think that I'm actually convinced by an excellent paper that's already couple of decades old. That's kind of, I mean, we don't have a proof of it, but it kind of argues that it's super likely that we live in a simulation. So basically, it was written by Nick Bostrom, and basically he argues that, and I think the title is just something like, "Are we living in a simulation?" or something, or in computer simulation, something like this. But anyway, so what Nick argues is that basically, if there's any civilization that is advanced enough that it can run simulations of either itself or other civilizations or whatever else, right? Then it would only make sense if it runs many such simulations, right? I mean, there is no point running a single simulation. Typically, when you want to find something out, you run like multiple simulations in which you tweak the parameters a little bit so that you can test different potential cases, right? Or you run multiple simulations just because there is some kind of chaos in the system, for example, and you want to see how things turn out or how different decisions will impact the final outcome. So, you know, if any such civilization would be running simulations, it would be running thousands, potentially millions of those simulations. And then basically it's just pure statistics, you know? It's like if there's thousands of simulations run per every one actual true civilization, then we have at least 1,000 to 1 chance of living in a simulation. So that's basically the argument, right? The argument is that it's statistically more likely that you live in a simulation because there's just going to be thousands and thousands more simulations, probably millions more simulations than actual real worlds in the universe. So yeah, statistically, technically, it's more likely that we live in a simulation. And, you know, I'm kind of like, I don't know, am I convinced by this argument? It's hard to refute this sort of argument because it's really hard to tell, like, how would you prove that you don't live in a simulation? I mean, how would you prove that you live or don't live in a simulation?
Well, I can. That's the problem because because I live in a simulation, I kind of stuck by its rules, right? There's nothing I can do. But
yeah, it's kind of like, do you know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of all those arguments, like various creationist arguments, or kind of like young Earth arguments, or something like this, in which people argue that, like, oh yes, you know, the Earth was created 6,000 years ago, and then you ask the question of like, well, how come we have fossils, you know, and we have all of those things in the ground that say that the Earth is so much older, and all the science is pointing that the Earth is so much older, and the answer is something like, well, you know, God has put it there. So that to confuse us or whatever, to make it seem like it's older. And it's kind of like a simulation, right? It's kind of like it was prepared there, and like you try to figure out, is it a simulation or is it not a simulation? Is it real or has it been put in there? And you go like, well, you know, technically anyone could have put it in there. Bertrand Russell, a great philosopher from the early 20th century, he had a really good retort to these sort of arguments, saying like, I don't think the Earth was created 6,000 years ago. I think Earth was created yesterday. And people go like, wait, I have memories of before yesterday. And he's just like, God put them there. Actually, it was created yesterday. It's like, how can you prove it wasn't? Well, that's the point. You can't prove it, right? But it's just like one of those the silly things. It's just like, yeah, doesn't matter in the end.
Yeah, I don't think it matters
Mm.
because I mean we're stuck here. So just try to live your best life. The thing is like
Yeah.
how can a video game character prove that he's not part of a video game? He can't because he has been programmed to be part of the simulation. And it's like how are you gonna um you as a two-dimensional being, how are you going to prove the existence of the third dimension? Or you as a third dimension being, how are you going to prove the fourth dimension? You just can't because it's just not part of your reality. So if there's something that it's so out of reach and so outside of your control, trying to have any influence over it is just insanity because there's nothing you can do about it. So
Yeah, it's really weird. And it's like, have you seen because people started to float the ideas of using AIs right now to put them in games as NPCs, right? As non-player characters in games. And then there's quite a few videos on YouTube of people coming up to these sort of NPCs and going like, hey, do you know you're a character in a game?
no way, really.
And those characters would have like full on, mental breakdowns in that. And you go like, crap. Like how like is that going to be different for us? How like would that be if someone came to you and told you you're actually a character in a game? Like how would you react,
I knew it. I was just gonna scream. I know. I
Yeah, well, what's your game, Prue? What's your game?
already know. Have you watched Rick and Morty?
Yeah, of course, yes.
I think there's an episode where like Morty just takes out a helmet out of nowhere and it
Hmm.
comes back to real life. And during this whole time, he was playing a game, but it didn't felt like a game. It felt like a lifetime. He was literally like living a completely different life.
Yeah.
Do you know the episode I'm
Yeah,
talking?
yeah, I
Yeah.
remember. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a thing that's been kind of floated in philosophy and in science fiction for so long. I mean, think of the Matrix or something like that, right? There's this whole idea that we're living some sort of like lie, and right now we kind of present it as a computer simulation or something like that. But in the, I don't know, 12th or 15th century, people were talking about being deceived by evil demons or something like this. I mean, same difference, right? The point is you don't live your real life, you live some sort of fake life. But I think that, like I said, I don't think it matters in the end. And if you're like, so again, I'm a philosopher. I don't know how much your listeners would know about me by now, but I'm a philosopher. I worked in value theory, and right now I'm teaching data ethics, and I teach a lot about AI and this sort of things. But I have a background in general philosophy as well, and one of the most interesting things I was always really interested in is all of those kind of thought experiments and very science fictiony ideas about how like metaphysics of the world and things to do with things such as determinism and indeterminism. So the idea is, is absolutely everything in the world predetermined, like in a game or like in a simulation or something like that, right? Are we living in a world in which there are only laws of physics? There is no actual like free will. You cannot actually change anything, right? It's just things are playing out like a game or like a deck of cards or something. Um, and then people get really fatalistic about this because they go like, well, it seems from what we know about physics that everything is following certain laws, right? We think that our minds are just our brains. Our brains are just physics, physical objects, right? They are subject to exactly the same laws. So why isn't absolutely everything that you ever do in your life completely predetermined? And what does it tell you about things such as, well, if you do something really evil and you're taken to court for it, do you just go like, not my fault, it was predetermined, right? Well, it kind of raises all sorts of questions, and people get really uncomfortable about this. But there's a great argument, I think, by Daniel Dennett, I think. He kind of came up with this theory of compatibilism. And the idea is that we can somehow square the fact that the world is largely deterministic with the fact that we still have a free will and we still get to choose the sort of things we do ourselves. And it's basically something like, um, if like determinism doesn't negate the fact that our subjective experience is that we make our own choices, right? We decide what we're going to do today. Even if it is actually like physically determined or something like that, to us, it's subjectively, it still feels like we are making the choice, right? And then when you think about free will, the way we understand it really is like the way we conceptualize free will is in terms of this kind of ability to weigh options, to deliberate, make choices based on what we want, what we desire, what we think is best, what our values are, what our beliefs are, and that sort of stuff. And we still have this, subjective experience of doing all of those things. So as long as we are not really coerced by anyone to kind of act against our will somehow, well, we would still act in accordance to free will, even though the world is fully deterministic. So, in the same vein, I think that like even if you live in a simulation, which is kind of pre-programmed by someone, and it kind of has the same vein, right? It's like everything is already predetermined somehow. It kind of doesn't matter because you still like in your subjective experience, you still make the choices you make. You still like decide to do certain things rather than others. And it's like I think that at the end of the day, it's kind of funny because a lot of the time, philosophy is presented as this blue sky research thing that has no relevance to everyday life. And I think that this is one of those most blue sky research thing that has very little relevance to everyday life, and yet people are really fascinated by it. So yeah, I think that's really fun.
Yeah, I think it's also fun, and I think it's interesting that a lot of people are interested by it,
Hmm.
and I think that's because a lot of people also believe in horoscopes. They like
Hmm.
to believe the idea that their life is already laid out in front of them, and that's because it takes a lot of responsibility out of your shoulders, right? Why
Yeah.
should I try to improve, try to better myself, learn something new if everything's already determined? And I think that's why it's a lot of people are interested by it. So yeah, determinism versus indeterminism. So is there a consensus?
No,
No,
absolutely not.
there's no consensus, right?
I
Okay.
mean, the thing is, you can kind of take it. You can take the fact that there is, and okay, when it comes to physics, the indeterminacy that we talk about in physics, or you might be familiar with the chaos theory and things like this, is not really about actual chaotic things, like actual randomness. No, it's largely about our inability to actually calculate those things, right? Those things are just so complex that it would take us an infinity of time to calculate it.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, I don't know, model exactly, I don't know, waves on a particular beach, for a day, like how many supercomputers would it take to predict exactly how each wave would go on this? It's insanely complex system, right?
But
Like all of those water molecules and everything. But at the same time, it's completely deterministic, right? There's no magic in it. It's just molecules crashing against other molecules. It's just so complex that we find it really like impossible to predict. And I think that when it comes to horoscopes and things like that as well, it's like a bit of that. It's just that life in general seems so complex to us that we just find it so difficult to bring order into this chaos ourselves to make it because when things are predictable, they feel safe. When things are predictable, we kind of know what's what and we know where we stand and we know what to expect and stuff like that. And it's very easy to not feel like that because the world is pretty chaotic. The world is super complex. And I mean, especially nowadays, it seems like the world is in complete upheaval again. So then, if we can have something that gives us this impression that there's order to this chaos, then people go for it, right? People want to feel like they have control. And that's, I think, like one of the reasons why horoscopes and these sort of things are so popular because they make people feel like they have some sort of control.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Oh man, in Dubai. Simon, could you maybe try to
Hmm.
lower your headphone volume a little bit? I can hear my voice through the through,
Yeah, of course.
through your headset.
Apologies.
No
Is this
problem.
better?
1, 2, 3 test.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a little bit better. So when it
Okay.
comes, thank you. When it comes to control, like I saw the
Hmm.
other day that there's a lot of floods going on in Dubai, and the first thing that I thought, what? That doesn't make any sense. First of all, it's like they build the whole city in a desert, and
Hmm.
second, like they have this rain system. They are in control of when it rains, how much it rains. So what the fuck's going on?
Oh,
Have you seen that?
no, I was not aware. Interesting.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
as far as I understand, something went wrong with the rain system because they were responsible for cloud seeding. So they had airplanes that would just basically oh man, I will not explain it correctly at all. So I will look it up.
All right.
How the cloud seeding in Dubai works. So cloud seeding is a technique used to improve precipitation. According to the Desert Research Institute, scientists do this by putting tiny particles called nuclei into the atmosphere that attach to clouds. These nuclei provide the base for snowflakes to form. Okay, and as far as I know, there's like huge floods going on in Dubai because whatever they tried to do, like the
Hmm.
system they're trying to control did not work. So floods Dubai. I don't wanna
Hmm.
spread misinformation here, so I'm gonna double check.
Fair enough.
What was the cause of the cold? The most common cause of floating is water due to rain. Okay, that's not what was because the high degree of surface with limited permeability. Okay, I'm sure someone will correct me in the in the comments. I don't want to spend
It
too
will go
much.
up.
I don't want to spend too much time on it. But like, how crazy would it be if humans, in their ego and their like search for control, try to manipulate nature so much that nature rebelled itself? I don't know what I'm going with it, but we
I
start.
mean, isn't that what's happening with climate change right now? I mean, extreme weather everywhere, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, weather is a great example of a purely deterministic yet super chaotic system as well, right? Fully deterministic yet try to predict the weather more than a week in advance.
Okay,
Hmm.
so just to finalize the
Yep.
Dubai thing, I found it. Experts cite climate change, not cloud seeding. So forget everything that I said. It has
There you
nothing to
go.
do. All right, sorry. Go.
Nature is absolutely rebelling. That is exactly what's happening. The funniest thing is that when people talk about climate change, then think about how we are destroying the Earth. I think that's not the biggest problem at all. The Earth will be just fine. It's us that won't be fine. We will have a problem. The Earth will rebuild itself. All right.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Have you watched like those? Like, there's so many TV shows about zombies, like The Last of Us or The Walking Dead.
Yep.
You just start seeing the nature growing back,
Yep.
everything coming back, going back to how
Yep.
it was. Like, so beautiful.
Absolutely. I just watched The Last of Us, and that was exactly, I mean, fantastic visuals. Loved it. But yeah, I mean, coming back to those simulations, now that I thought about this, because like think of like worlds such as, those post-apocalyptic worlds or whatever else, would you want to, or even the world now, many people seem to be kind of checking out of the world a little bit. And, as the world is kind of a bit dangerous, chaotic and everything, like I think that the interesting question doesn't necessarily like, are we all living in a simulation right now? But like, will people actually want to live in a simulation? Like when the world gets pretty nasty, or even right now, like how many people would actually prefer to live in a simulation, to live in some sort of matrix type thing?
Hmm.
And I think that that's a really interesting question. It's also like one of those things that, like has been a topic of various science fiction novels or whatever else. And you don't need to like dig far to find, philosophers and other people saying like, oh no, the real world is always better than the simulation. All the pleasures of the simulation are not worth the same as the reality of the real world. But you go like, why? It's not an easy question to answer actually. Um, yeah, people like to think that, the like avoiding pain and discomfort and just going for a simulation in which you just experience constant happiness and whatever else is just somehow devoid of meaning, or it's not as valuable or things like this. Um, and it's really interesting because we all do that to some extent. Like we all play games sometimes, or we all like watch movies. I mean, what is this if not escape from the real world for a moment, right? So we go like, well, a certain amount of it is okay, a certain amount of like not living in the real world is fine, but not too much. And then it becomes really difficult. And I think that we are actually entering a time in our civilization right now when a lot of those questions that used to be kind of very theoretical, blue sky philosophical questions again, kind of become really practical. Because like soon enough, it might well be that people will be able to choose. You know, I actually want to live in the metaverse. Like what are we gonna tell them?
Oh man,
Yeah.
I don't know if I cry or if I laugh because it's
Mm.
true.
Yeah.
It's true. Like have like you can see that. So we know that for sure that arts imitates life and life imitates arts,
Yeah.
right? That we know that. So just look at the last movies that came out like in the past decade or 2 decades or so. We have well,
Hmm.
Matrix of course is started all for me at least, but then
Hmm.
there was Wally, or the one from
Yeah.
Disney, where
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
see all the fat humans in their chair just with their tablets. What else? And then Ready Player One, like those things are a reflection of our society or of our desires and our fears, like
Hmm.
and this question that you raised, like how much is too much, like are we gonna be living in in the simulation all the time, escaping our reality of the time? People already do it, right? You
Yeah.
said like there must be a balance, and the thing is there's no balance when it comes to those things. Like Apple tried to implement the screen time on the iPhone, but
Hmm.
but it's useless. It shows, oh, you watch 10 minutes of Instagram today. Let's say your limit is 10 minutes. You can just, below there's a button, continue or not. You know, you can bypass those things so easily. So
Hmm.
when it comes to escaping from reality, uh, there, basically there's no limit, there's no education when it comes to it, and
Yeah.
there's more people addicted to smartphones than ever. More people, like I saw a study recently that the average person has the least amount of friends that they ever had ever in society, in history. Like the average person has one friend or something like that, because everyone's just so addicted to escaping
Yeah.
reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we make it easier and easier, and because, it's profitable. And unfortunately, do you know the concept of banality of evil?
No, I do not.
Yeah, it's basically this idea that like real evil doesn't happen because, some evil villains are out there plotting the demise of the universe or, trying to get control of the earth or whatnot. Um, no, it's kind of just people, you know, not thinking or not taking enough care or just not. I think it was Hannah Arendt who coined the phrase and kind of the talking about the Nazi trials and the fact that a lot of those people just kind of followed orders without thinking very much, for example. And a lot of the evil that is happening right now when it comes to this sort of social media things that you're mentioning isn't because, oh, here's an example. Facebook or Meta right now is facing a massive trial that started, I think, a couple of years ago about a genocide that was caused in Myanmar against the Rohingya people. I think. I hope I'm not mispronouncing this. Basically, there was those people are Muslim. There was a kind of basically ethnic cleansing happening in there, and thousands of people died, and hundreds of thousands of people got misplaced. And the accusation is that Facebook was used as a platform on which this kind of racial and religious hatred was spreading, and on which people organized to do this, and it kind of stoked, it basically acted as a platform for hate mongering. And they are facing like hundreds of billions of dollars and legal kind of court cases. And like I don't think that anyone in Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg the least, sat down and thought like, huh, I wonder how much money we can make on causing a genocide in Myanmar, right? No, nobody thinks that. It's instead they just weren't thinking about what their platform can be used for, you know? It's not that they sat and thought about how can we cause the most evil. No, they just didn't consider what kind of evil could be their platform could be used for. And these sort of things are around everywhere. It's not like they designed their algorithm
One
so
second.
that it promotes hate speech.
So just
Instead,
so that let me
yeah,
just read the news. So
yeah,
Myanmar Facebook systems promoted violence against Rohingya. So what is Rohingya? Meta owes reparations in report.
it's an ethnic group, and they are basically Muslims and a majority, I think, majority Buddhist country. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the point is that, you know, Facebook algorithm works in such a way as to keep you scrolling, right? Its point is to create engagement. It shows you the sort of content that will keep you on the platform. Now, it so happens that the easiest way to keep you on the platform is to engage you emotionally with something, right? And the quickest emotion that will engage you is anger. So this algorithm learns pretty quickly that in order for you to engage with some content, the shortest way to do that is to make you angry. Because when you're angry, you're gonna hit this, dislike button, or you're gonna like write an angry comment, or you're gonna, engage with some other people, and that keeps you on the platform, which means that they can show you more ads, which means that they can get more revenue, right? So it's not that they want to make you angry, they want to keep you on the platform. It just so happens that this is the shortest way, right? It's not that they wanted to create this sort of hate that led to a genocide. No, they just wanted to keep people on the platform. Yeah. And the rest is just, well, the banality of evil. As the evil happens because, people don't think, people don't question, people don't make good decisions. Yeah. And, I do worry about this when it comes to AI right now because so many people are, raising really big and important questions about this, but there are very strong incentives out there to just, profit from this, to get those systems as quickly as possible, to get as much power as possible through them, and things like this. And I think that there is a high probability that similar things might unfortunately happen because, well, the incentives are such that, people will not look at the evil that they're creating potentially.
Oh yeah, for sure, because it's all about business as usual, right? They see a new cool technology they can monetize, they
Hmm.
monetize the shit out of it. Why not? Like, it's making money. Let's make out of it, more of it, So, make money now, ask questions later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole other I have to say I'm a little bit uh, disappointed with how OpenAI has been unfolding over the last years because they started off with this very lofty mission of developing AGI for the good of humanity, and that pretty much seems to be in the bin right now. I mean, they're just, selling their products to the highest bidders, and that's it. Um, yeah, so I have to say that when we spoke about this fear of uncertainty and chaos and, lack of order in the world, well, I feel like there is a lot of chaos and uncertainty in the world right now. It's interesting times we live in, most definitely.
Do you use ChatGPT?
I do use ChatGPT, absolutely. I don't see why not. In fact, um, it's one of those things that was a big discussion in the academia or in teaching in general, because, you know, well, it kind of revolutionized assessment. I mean, I cannot ask my students to write an essay right now. That's a gone skill. So I need to take into account that all of my students are using ChatGPT as well, and I think that's okay. That's just fine. It's the same way as, I'm not marking my students on, I don't know, how good their handwriting is. I mean, again, it's a skill that used to be really important at some point. Then came a technology that made it unimportant, and it's not important anymore. And I think that it's kind of the same with ChatGPT right now. It's going to change how we do research, how we discover new information, how we look for information. And I don't think there is any point in paddling back history or sticking to the old ways. It's a new tool. Everyone's going to use it. Just need to learn to, you know, I don't know, how does life look like after that?
I agree 100%.
Mhm.
It's evolution. It's like adapt or die. When the um, computers came around, I
Mhm.
remember my grandma was telling me that she had to learn how to type on the type machine.
Yep.
and of course it was useless after a few years, but she still had to learn it.
Yep.
I see this evolution like with AI much the same way, very much the same way. Like it's a new thing, it's a new tool. It has its good points, it has bad points. You need to learn to live with it, try
Hmm.
to adapt into your work, because if you don't, you're gonna be outdated. Whoever learn it better and
Yep.
faster will get your job, you know.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned, it has like the good side and the bad sides. Like anything, like a car. You can buy a car and you can travel, see the world, not see the world, but travel a lot, you know, create wonderful memories, go to conference. You can do so many wonderful things with your car. Your first kiss can be in a car, you know, like
Hmm.
it's an amazing tool. But you can also just drive and kill a, a bunch of people. So,
Hmm.
like, I don't think new tools, are bad, but the way you use those shoes, that's the problem, you know? Like,
Yeah, so I will kind of try to expand maybe on this a little bit because I think that different tools are a bit different in this respect.
okay,
So you could argue, um, so basically what you're saying is a bit like what mm, the Facebook people are arguing when they defend themselves against these sort of accusations that I mentioned before, which is that we just give you a tool, we just give you a platform. How people use it is up to you, right?
yeah,
But think about it. You have different types of tools. I mean, when you give someone a bread knife and when you give someone a combat knife, right? I mean, those tools lend themselves to different uses,
mm,
right? When you give someone a teddy bear and you give someone a gun, those tools lend themselves to different uses, right? Because that is exactly the same sort of defense that the Rifle Association has, right? Like guns don't kill people, people kill people. Well, yeah, but guns are the sort of things that's the sort of tools that are not used for cuddling in bed most of the time, right? I mean, I'm sure that there are some people who absolutely do. Yeah, but and so with other things. I mean, there is a reason why um, we keep such strong control of certain things and like I don't know, access to information on how to I don't know make weapons or make bombs or like you cannot enrich uranium in your back garden even if you wanted to, right? You cannot clone humans even if you wanted to. There are some technologies, some things that we recognize have a very high potential for abuse, very high potential for creating a lot of damage, and therefore we control them. So we go like, yes, okay, it's a tool. It can be used for many things, but there is a really high danger that it will be used for bad things. So we need to keep, good like control over it. And this is what the European Union AI Act is trying to do right now. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's just coming out right now. So, but basically in it, they try to divide different artificial intelligence technologies into kind of impact categories. Like, is it really quite trivial? Is it quite significant? Or is it like has a really high potential for having really high impact, right? And they go like, well, for the trivial things, we don't need to regulate those things very much. The middle things we regulate a little bit, but the really dangerous things we are going to regulate really hard. And I think that, well, that's a pretty sensible approach. And when you think about technologies as tools, it's really important always to remember that like some of those tools are lending themselves to better uses or worse uses, and also some of those tools are just less powerful than others, right? And AI is going to be an extremely powerful tool. And we've got other really powerful, like people compare, when people call for regulation of AI, people compare it to atomic energy
atomic energy,
in
okay,
terms of like how important it is that we have some sort of international oversight over this, right? Think of the sort of damage you can do. And I think that it's not a misplaced, idea. I mean, imagine you have an AI that you can just ask, hey, design me a new virus, right? So I think that yeah, that's it's important to remember that yes, those things are tools, but like those tools have, there's tools and there's tools. Let's put it this way.
yeah, yeah. But going back to the gun thing,
Hmm.
I kind of agree that not everyone should have a gun because it's again they're not made to be just for you to cuddle them in bed. But at the same time, I don't see how like prohibiting them make the whole country better, right? Because you still need to protect yourself, and whatever you do, the police or quote unquote the government is still have guns.
Hmm.
I don't have a solution. It's just like contemplating like the different alternatives and what is happening out there.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Well, I know for sure that most of the world, you can't have a gun, and we're
yeah.
just fine. In fact, we're probably quite a bit better in terms of, mass shootings. So, yeah. Apologies.
I don't think you're saying anything wrong. Like you're not lying. So yeah. So why we're talking about mass.
I have no idea how we got there. Um,
So we were talking about simulation, right?
yeah.
When it
Well, we
com-
started talking about AIs as well right now, but sorry, go on if you wanted to ask something.
I wanted to ask about simulation. So
Hmm.
going back a little bit to this theme, because my first introduction to this theme was through, as I mentioned, Matrix. But
Hmm.
as far as I know, it goes way back. It's like it's not a new theme for humankind. And then I remember that I learned in school about the cave theory, right? With the shadows
Hmm.
on the wall. Could you is this related to the simulation theory?
Sure, yeah. So this is a metaphor that was developed by Plato and his Republic, and basically the idea is that he draws this um, analogy in which you imagine yourself as sitting in a cave, chained to the cave, and all you can see is the wall in front of you. And on the wall in front of you, you see shadows being cast by things that are outside of the cave. But the wall is all you can see. So if you only ever saw this wall, you would think that this is real life. You would think that this is all there is, right? But actually, all of those things are merely shadows of the things that are being cast behind the cave. And Plato used this to kind of spin his theory of the ideas. So he thinks that all the things that are out here in the world are just reflections of kind of ideal versions of them. So, you might be a particular person, but you're like a instantiation of the ideal of a person, or he called it forms, right? So the things outside of the cave are the actual forms of things. That's the actual reality, and we humans only perceive the particular instantiations of it in the world. And Plato himself didn't make this into much of a kind of mystical theory, but later on it was picked up by Neoplatonists and early. There's a whole bunch of early Christian sects that were called themselves the Gnostics, and the Gnostics were all about the idea that the world that we are in right now is a prison that has been created by Demiurgos. And Demiurgos is the god of the Old Testament who has created the earth to imprison all the souls of humans in it. But actually, our role is to get out of this world and find our place back out in the real reality somewhere out there. And this is exactly what inspired, say, this is exactly the Matrix. This is the story of the Matrix. Or like Ubik, if you like Philip K. Dick or other kind of classic science fiction. And it was done in like the 3rd century AD. It's really funny as well because they had two ways in which they thought that it would be interesting. It would be best to rebel against this sort of evil god who put you in this evil world, and that is, well, if the world is itself is evil or wrong or something like that, that you should renounce everything of the world, right? You should become as ascetic as possible. Don't take any pleasures of the world. Don't do anything that the world is tempting you with, because the world is wrong and evil. You need to like renounce it and get out of it, right? And the other way was to go like, well, God gave us all of those rules. Let's break absolutely all of them because those rules are evil. Um, so it's just like people have been like playing with this idea for centuries, and it's a really fascinating idea. And it's like until now it's been, I don't know, firing people's imaginations up. But it's really fascinating, particularly now, because now we can actually make it reality. Like we can build those simulations right now. You maybe in 10, 15 years time, you could live in a metaverse or something like this. So yeah, I think it's like you say, it's one of those like literature creates reality, reality creates literature, and it's kind of feedback loop.
Yeah, and it feels like a lot of stuff is going on, or will, like, it's already going on and will happen during our lifetime.
Hmm.
From what I know from history, for many many years, hundreds or no, if not thousands of years, like, civilization did not evolve. Like, if it did, it was a very very slow process, right? Something was invented here, and then a lot of years passed, something else was invented there, but generally speaking, society and like, it was the same. And then, out of nowhere, like, technology after technology, like, was a very exponential curve that just skyrocketed. And here we are, inventing AI, inventing, like, alternative realities, maybe we're probably gonna colonize Mars in less than 10 years or so. Like, it was a jump, like, it's incredibly fast and preposterous jump. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. And how do you navigate that, right? Because, like, in the middle of all of that, like, are you gonna be jobless in the 5 years? Like, I just saw what I think was, yeah, 2 days ago, this company who makes robots, how it's called again, um I forgot their name, but they make those humanoid robots. MKBHD
Hmm.
from YouTube. He made a little short about it, and and,
Right?
and they are basically like humanoids who can walk, and they don't talk, but they can act like humans,
Hmm.
kind of jump. Like, it's crazy.
Hmm.
It's literally crazy. Like, if you put someone, if you take someone from 100 years ago and put it today, like, it already feels like a fever dream. Imagine in 100 years from now.
Absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right, and this is I think the my main worry right now. My main worry isn't that AI will, become conscious and kill us all, and we will live in a Terminator world or something like this. I mean, maybe,
Boston
but this
Dynamics.
isn't. But like,
So sorry, the robots were called from Boston Dynamics. Yeah, sorry.
all right, thanks. Um, my main worry is that, like you say, this like speed of change is so, um, yeah, it's speeding up so much that right now we are on a precipice of a massive economic revolution and social revolution. Like we are going to change what work means, right? Or who works, like why do we even work? And that is people compare it right now to the Industrial Revolution, right? So the 19th century. But the thing is, the Industrial Revolution unfolded on, on the scale of decades, right? It unfolded over decades, starting from the first steam engines, and like you could argue that some countries still have not been fully industrialized, right? And we are almost 200 years later. The Industrial Revolution sparked the beginnings of communism. It sparked, the massive world conflict between systems such as capitalism and communism, and like those kind of massive ideological wars and things like that. And that thing unfolded, like I say, on the scale of, well, like a century. And right now, because of how things are speeding up, we are potentially heading towards a revolution of an equal, I know, weight and size and intensity, just that it will happen in 5 years or potentially in 10 years. And like social change is possible. People get used to new things. We can work things out. We can make things, work for us. But it takes time. Like people need time to get used to it. Some people will never get used to it, but it's okay because they will die and new ones will come who will be okay with it, right? And but now maybe there won't be time for this, right? If there was once a situation in which someone, I don't know, who was a, I don't know, someone who made shoes all their life or something like that, could not, I don't know, adjust to a new world in which it was mostly machines that made shoes or whatever else, you know, they could still kind of live their lives and like make a living somehow and all that because the world didn't change that fast. Some people would still buy shoes of them or whatever else. Um, and then the next generation was already used to this and they were fine working in factories or whatever else. But right now, potentially this will not happen over a generation. It will happen over 5 years. And it's really, yeah, I think it's the speed of this change is going to be scary and it's going to upset a lot of people. So when I think about the stuff that I'm most worried about when it comes to the coming AI revolution, like I say, it's not that AI will come and kill us all. It's that it will just change the way we work and live to such an extent that people will just find it really difficult to adjust, to get used to it. And that means that we will have a lot of very unhappy people. And a lot of very unhappy people means, well, a lot of unrest of one sort or another.
Mm. That's a very nice way, Simon, of saying that a lot of people will
Mhm.
be jobless.
Mm.
uh,
Well, I mean, it's also an interesting thing because, like, do you want to work? Like, it's one of those funny things because, like, we all go like, "Oh no, we will lose jobs" and all that. But like, when you ask all of those people who are so afraid of losing jobs, do you actually like your job? Do you
it,
like want to work?
mm, mm,
Right? I mean, many people would be quite like, if I could have money and not work, sure. So I think that it's really interesting that we talk about this always in the context of, jobs will change, but I think like it's really useful to think of it as a potentially like a great opportunity to rethink how our society works, right? Because like work and jobs are not only things that give you money, they're also things that give you some sort of meaning in life, that make you feel useful, that we use to judge your social status, for example, that we use to judge whether you're a useful member of society or not, something like that, right? But potentially we could change the system, right? Maybe your worth as a human is not necessarily tied to how much you can produce that other humans can use. Maybe, we can tie it with something else. Maybe instead of producing GDP, you can be producing, well, I mean, I think that your example as a podcaster, for example, is good in here. You're producing something that, adds value to people's lives, makes people feel like, huh, I've learned something new. Or, I don't know, I broadened my horizons or something like this. Maybe, this is the sort of value that we want people to this is the sort of thing that we want people to draw their value from rather than producing another, pair of shoes or whatever else. Um, so I think it's a great opportunity as well to rethink, like, why is it that we value work so much? Do we actually want to work so much? And if we don't, then what do we replace it with?
yeah, that's a very good point. And also, it's not like new types of works are not being created every day. Like
Hmm.
YouTuber, that's a
Yeah.
new. It's a brand new career that didn't exist back then. Also, like streamer, all
Yeah.
of those things. And I just found this list of like several jobs that are have been created recently or will be created in the future.
Hmm.
Let me go through it. I think that's very very interesting.
Hmm.
Screen share. So uh, best 14 jobs of the future, the most in demand careers. So, software developer, okay, blockchain jobs, virtual reality jobs. Yeah, we keep talking about virtual reality and AI and escapism.
Hmm.
Like, we haven't talked about how this will create new jobs for people working in those systems, like in those alternative realities.
Sure. Hmm.
Okay, ethical
I've seen
high.
some job ads already for prompt designer.
What?
Prompt designer, as in you design the prompts that you put into AI systems so that you get the outputs that you
Really?
need.
Oh, and
Yeah, yeah,
this one's a good one. Mental health jobs. You're gonna need more of that.
yeah. Well, definitely.
All right.
But yeah, I really like to think that we might be in this kind of inflection point in which right now we are at the stage in which the old system is kind of falling apart, but it's not yet replaced with anything new. We're working out what this new thing is going to be. But potentially once we work it out, it's going to be awesome. I mean, if we, don't kill humanity in the process. But potentially it's going to be awesome, and that's great. And I also think that like it's people laugh that it's a curse. Oh, may you live in interesting times, but it's really interesting. It's really fun to live today and kind of witness all of those changes. I count myself lucky for having been born right now, even though I'm a millennial who definitely struggles with a lot of the millennial problems that people, bring up. I definitely, suffered from the financial crash of 2008 and stuff like that. Um, but I still think that I'd rather live in an interesting time like this than, oh, maybe that's coming back to the simulation, would you rather live in a simulation in which you have absolutely everything and it's constant pleasure all the time? Or would you rather live in a time in which there's some pain and discomfort, but it feels real, it feels interesting, it feels like there's meaning in it? And well, I would choose the latter. I don't judge people who wouldn't, but I think that it's something to value as well potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And when, for example, when I look back in my life, it has been like the times that I suffered the most or went through the most troubles. Like that's when I grown the most.
Hmm.
So that's when I evolved and learned new things. Imagine instead of like going through those difficult times, I just immerse myself into VR.
Hmm.
I would not grow. I would not change. I would stay the same person. And again, looking back, I'm really glad that I went through like the struggles that I did. And I think this applies to not only in the individual and personal level, but as
Hmm.
like society as large. We're gonna go through this together, but it's gonna come out better at the end because what is technology? Technology is like we discussed, a tool that helps you like achieve something, achieve like a task or goal,
Hmm.
and but more fundamentally than that, like a tool is just helps you to achieve like something. Like a pencil helps you to write in a better way. Like you can erase. It's better than writing with a stick, or
Hmm.
or a rock and so far. So a plane helps you so the thing is, the way I see it, technology as a whole helps you to work less, makes your life
Yeah.
easier. And we are reaching like this point where technology is so advanced that our life is just too easy, you know and this is good. That has good points, and it has
Hmm.
like the good points and negative points. Yeah, that.
Yeah, I think so. And, like think about it this way. You could right now take a helicopter and land on top of, I don't know, Mont Blanc or Mount Everest or whatever mountain, you can think of that is really hard to climb. And you could go like, yes, yes, I managed. I am here. I conquered this mountain. Like, would you really be like that proud of like, and all of those other
uh,
people who actually climbed from the bottom, are there as well? And you go like, it's kind of cheating, right? Um, so I think that yeah, there is value in the strife and trying to, you know, or yeah, we want to achieve things and we want to conquer difficulties. So
have
like
you
taking it all away and just making life fully convenient all the time is just missing the point a bit.
yeah, have you heard about the IKEA effect?
Oh yes, when you make something just put a little bit of work so it feels like yes, yes, I heard about. Yeah.
So it's human. We need to have some type of effort. We need to put some type of effort in the things around
Mhm.
us. Otherwise, our life basically feels meaningless.
I really wonder how
Yeah.
this will play out right now in a field of dating, of all things.
Ooh.
And I'm bringing that up because a bunch of my students actually are doing a project right now about the topic of virtual companions. You can go, there are some websites where you can basically get an AI girlfriend or a boyfriend, right? And it's effectively a chatbot with some graphics, so it's not super complicated right now yet. But I can imagine that this is a big market, right? This is definitely going to grow. People are going to want to have virtual companions. But this is exactly it, because, you know, those virtual companions will not, well, they will not be like real humans, I think, in terms of challenging you. right? They will be there to, well, fulfill your fantasies effectively, right? To be everything that you would want a partner to be for you. But that's not what any real human would be like, right? Any real human would have their own wants and interests and desires and thoughts and opinions and whatever else. And with a real human, when you're in a relationship with a real human, you need to struggle with this. You need to struggle with the fact that this other person is a different person who is not does not want the same stuff as you always. But when you will have a virtual companion, then you want, right? Instead, you can basically, want this thing to do whatever you want it to do. And I really wonder how this will impact, what happens in dating, how people are able to actually form real relationships. Will people just get so used to getting absolutely everything they want from a virtual partner that when they actually pair up with a real partner and it turns out that they can't, they will freak out and they will not know what to do, right? It's I think it's a fascinating question that is going to come up sooner than we think right now.
Oh
And
man.
given how many people struggle with relationships and with an epidemic of loneliness we are in right now, I think this is going to be a big problem. And unfortunately, I think that this is another one of those things we talked about Facebook and the banality of evil and how people don't like want to do evil. They just kind of do it because they don't think or they just do whatever is profitable without thinking too much.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that's potentially one of those examples in which people are designing something that has the potential to, you know, very negatively influence how we relate to other people and how we're able to form relationships. And they're just waltzing right into it. Because, I mean, you could argue the same thing about dating apps, right? So many people are so disillusioned with dating apps right now. And so many people argue, well, they have just commodified love effectively. They have reduced meeting a person to meeting a profile. They have reduced, going to a bar and starting to talk with someone and actually try to connect with them somehow to spending 2.6 seconds on looking at the photo as hot enough and swiping right. Right? This is what they've done. And right now, what they have created is that they have created a situation in which people are so used to the idea that um, potential partners are plentiful because there's always new ones to swipe on, that it always feels like, well, if not this one, I'll just find someone better because there's so many of them. And well, it effectively has massively transformed our dating. It has massively transformed how much people are willing to, how much work people are willing to put into their relationships, how much, at which point do they just go like, nah, it's too much work. I'm just going to find a different one. Um, and to what extent, like, we stopped treating other humans or potential partners as humans who have the right to just be different and not want what we want, and to what extent we, treat them like, I don't know, your pair of shoes broke, just Bennett, get a new pair of shoes.
Hmm. I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
And humans are complicated. Humans are complicated. It's like if your relationship is going through a rough phase,
Mm-hmm.
just my opinion is like just try to figure it out. Because if it's happening in this relationship, it'll probably happen in the next one. Mostly like the problem is you, it's not even the other person. If
Mm-hmm.
you're having so much troubles in a relationship to begin with. And as you said, we commodified relationships, and it's like, bro, if you're too complicated, you're just gonna find someone else. Or as soon as the excitement is over, because there's
Mm-hmm.
a honeymoon phase, right? The first few
Yep.
months, that's the exciting part. And after that, oh, the spark is over. I don't feel it anymore. No, of course not. The honeymoon phase is over. Now begins the real relationship. Now the that you actually get to know each other for
Mm-hmm.
real begins. And I think that's the interesting part, because that's again, that's when the real relationship begins. And most people, first of all, they are not even conscious about that. They don't even understand that. And I think they're just not interested on that at all. They're so used to be stimulated all the time, like as we talked about social media, movies, internet, all of those things, new songs every day. Like, why relationships cannot be like that as well? It needs to be stimulating, but that's not reality. But that's not really the reality of any meaningful long-term relationship. But that's the thing. Tinder is not looking to create meaningful long-term relationships. What they're looking for is exactly what you mentioned, like the create like transform people into objects because that's their business model.
Yeah, of course.
Netflix don't want you to start making don't start want you to start jogging or doing exercise because that's not their business model. They want you to stay in front of TV as long as possible, watching one episode after the other. So yeah,
Absolutely. No, that's exactly it. And again, it's not that they want to be evil, right? It's just their business model has a system of incentives, such as it rewards things that are not good for you in the end.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think that, the whole coming back to the simulation thing, I mean, it's just up another massive level, right? Because now if you are already not willing to put in the work to be with someone because it's so easy to swipe right and it feels at least like it's gonna be easy to find someone else, or at least it feels like you should have this shopping list of tick boxes, and if they don't tick all of your boxes, then you just bin this one. Don't work on making it work, but rather just bin this one and find another one. Well, how much more will it be if you're already used to having a virtual girlfriend or a virtual boyfriend and that person ticking all of your boxes, right? Because, it's just some lines of code. You can rewrite them in such a way that it ticks your boxes.
yeah, yeah. Have you
Yeah.
tried those chatbots?
I have not. I'm actually really excited to see what the student project will be because we're just starting it. It's just new semester right now, and basically we're starting it right now. So I'm really curious what it will be.
So they're developing it from the ground up.
Oh, no, no. So my students are only going to like use the existing ones and
Oh,
evaluate them. So basically, we are doing a data ethics module. I'm talking to students about well, many of the subjects that we already mentioned in here, but a lot about like privacy and algorithmic fairness and things like this. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is different biases in generative AIs. So some of my students have been doing absolutely fascinating projects about how when you prompt ChatGPT to give you descriptions of different people, it will assign different roles to them depending on their races or genders. So, for example, there's been a lot of research done that when you ask ChatGPT something like, uh, there are two people, one of them is a doctor, the other one is a nurse. Which one of them is a man and which one of them is a woman, for example, right? It will answer, oh, that is a wrong question to ask. There is nothing about gender that ascribes people to roles and all that, right? But if you ask it, for example, and this is one of the projects that my students have been inspired by, if you ask it to write me a story about two children, John and Mary, one of them is thinking about becoming a doctor and one of them is thinking about becoming a nurse. Guess who is always the one who wants to become a doctor?
the man?
Yeah, exactly, right? It turns out that is the man. Um, my students have been doing similar projects in which they were doing like immigrants and natives. So, for example, in Germany, we have a lot of Turkish immigrants. So they did something like write me a story about a bank robbery. And there's a robber and there's a policeman involved, and one of them is German, the other one is Turkish, and write me a story about them. And it turns out that 9 times out of 10, the policeman is German, but the robber is Turkish, right? And so forth. So basically, there's those biases that are kind of there, and those even if they patch them up. So if you ask ChatGPT a straight off question, right, like who is more likely to be a policeman or a thief? Is it a German or a Turk? Right? It will tell you, it will give you the politically correct answer. It will just say like, there's no way to determine this, blah blah blah. But if you just prod a little bit under the hood, right? And you ask it like not a direct question, but kind of like sideways question, then it turns out that those biases are there. And why are they there? Well, because it's been trained on data sets of, what humans think. And this is how humans think. Um, so this is parts of the sort of things that I teach in my class on data ethics. And this is why I'm kind of really interested in this I don't know, just taking those more theoretical philosophical problems like the ones we already discussed and kind of applying them to those very practical those very practical situations that we're facing right now with AI or with, other kind of algorithmic systems. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Didn't Google presented their AI system not a long time ago, like this month or last month, and it
Hmm.
was a completely shit show, I think, because they started like do you know the story I'm talking about? Like it was so bad that they completely disabled the function of the AI to generate humans.
Yeah, so it's Gemini, right?
Gemini,
Or
yes, yeah, I
yeah.
think so.
Hmm.
Do you know what happened?
I'm not exactly familiar with what they removed. No. Oh,
Gemini,
curious though.
human AI. Let's see. Learn about Gemini. Oh man, it was like a controversy. Human color scan. Okay, so why Google's AI tool was slammed for showing images of people of color? Something like that.
Oh, that's it. Yes, there's a racial diversity thing. Yes, I remember.
Gemini attempt to correct the marginalization of ethnic minorities has backfired.
Hmm.
America's founding fathers depicted a black woman and an ancient Greek warriors as Asian woman and man. This was the world
Yeah.
reimagined by Google's generative AI tool Gemini in late of February. So it was basically like, there you go. You can see it here.
Hmm.
So it.
Yeah, it's really funny. So this is, yeah, I remember now because some of my other students have done a project that was kind of related to this as well, about how image generators try to introduce some diversity in the images that they generate, right? Um, and what they were trying to prod, it's really funny as well, was they were trying to compare how different image generators from different countries do that. It's a fascinating project because they were comparing a Russian generator called Chedevron and Dali, so an American one. And basically, what they asked it to do was to draw representations of people from different Soviet republics. So Tajikistan, for example, Azerbaijan, what was it, Belarus as well. I don't remember which other ones. Kazakhstan, I think, as well. And basically, the idea or the hypothesis was that the American one will just represent them all as the same. There will be no difference, right? Whereas the local one will represent them as more diverse. But what they found in the process was absolutely fascinating, and it was kind of like just a side note in their project. But I think it will be really interesting to develop further, which is that the American DALI was trying to diversify the results in a very American way, which is that if it was asked to give you representations of people from those parts of the world, it would diversify them as if they were Americans. So, for example, a certain percentage of them were Native American facial features, or a certain percentage of them were African Americans, despite the fact that in this part of the world there are no African Americans, right? So it kind of like it imposed the view of what we think racial diversity should be onto a part of the world in which there is racial diversity, it's just a different diversity, right? But it kind of imposed the American vision of what racial diversity should be on this part of the world. I think it's fascinating how basically they are trying to patch those systems to sidestep those problems, but kind of doing it in a very crude way sometimes.
They're trying. They're getting. They're gonna get
Yeah.
there eventually. It's the beginning, right? But
Hmm.
I think all of those racial diverse conflicts are so silly. You know, I think that we talk about colonizing Mars. This will solve a lot of problems because at the end of the day, we're a human species. Like people tend to get too um how to say, what would be a good word for it. At the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. That's what I want to say, because like, yeah, that's all.
I mean, I don't feel super qualified to talk about this. I will just put it out there that as one white middle class man to another, I think that different people will have different
Of
perspectives of that.
course, yeah,
And
yeah.
obviously, we are talking about this from our point of view and our point of privilege as well. And obviously, other people will perceive it very differently. So I wouldn't want to make any judgments on this. Like our experience of the world is different than people, other people's who are racialized differently, and I'm sure that they will have opinions about this. So, but like I said, I don't feel particularly qualified to talk about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
I agree. Um, I want to ask you about something else, actually. So, what is meta philosophy? What that means?
Meta. So when you add meta in front of anything, it means a reflection about that thing. So it's kind of like one level up. So when you that kind of comes from a Greek word. I don't actually. Oh, what does it? I don't remember what it means exactly. Most famously, Aristotle's book. That's where we have the word metaphysics, because Aristotle wrote a book that's called Physics, and then the next book was about things that are about physics, and then it was called metaphysics because it's about physics, or it comes after physics. Um, and meta philosophy is kind of like this reflection about philosophy, or how do we do philosophy, or how to do philosophy right, or how potentially are we doing something wrong when we do philosophy. So I guess that you bring it up because I wrote a couple things about different aspects of metaphilosophy, and I've been actually discussing various diversity issues in philosophy, and that is to do with the fact that the way we systematize philosophy, so the way we decide what are the branches of philosophy or what are the topics in philosophy and all that, I think is somewhat Western biased, or at least it is very Western biased in some of the systems that I have been looking at. So I wrote a bunch of papers about this topic and how we should be better at systematizing philosophy in such a way that it does not marginalize well, lots of different philosophies that are out there in the world and only kind of centers the Western Anglo-American philosophy.
Could you give us examples of marginalized philosophies?
Yeah, sure. So there's a very rich Indian tradition in philosophy. There's a fantastic Islamic tradition in philosophy. There's quite a lot of African philosophy that we know very little about, and not to mention about less marginalized but still not particularly often taught in the West traditions, such as the Chinese tradition. So basically, why am I saying marginalized? I can tell you, I spent 9 years studying philosophy across 3 different universities. Do you know how many modules in that entire time I had that were devoted to any of those philosophies, any of those traditions?
No idea.
Zero. Exactly none, right? And I manage a project called the Diversity Reading List, which is trying to help lecturers across the Western world to kind of diversify their teaching so that to include these sort of other traditions. And we've done some research. We have looked at the top 10 British universities and the philosophy departments, so the best departments in Britain. So Oxford, Cambridge, London School of Economics and stuff. And we asked them, we reviewed all of their curriculums. What do they actually teach, right? And we found that across all of the modules that they teach, there are exactly 3% of those modules are about any other tradition than the Western analytic tradition of philosophy. Exactly 3% of all the modules. So this is what I mean by marginalized.
And why is that? Why only three? Why
Um,
it was like a conscious decision to marginalize those other philosophies?
I think that for a long time in the West, there has been this kind of post-colonial view that other people don't have that much to say, or that the stuff that we have to say is more important, um, which is frankly a bit ludicrous. I mean, Confucius has as many fantastic ideas as Plato did. There is no reason why we are teaching Plato, but we're not teaching Confucius, for example. And there's lots of other examples that could be put out there. Um, what can I tell you? People make bad decisions. Yeah.
Well, from an external point of view, I think that they have been marginalized because it's safer, it feels safer to pick something that is familiar to you, or a culture that is closer to you. It just feels safer. I would say that would be the logical explanation, right?
Yeah, potentially. And
Mm,
I think that, to some extent, people would also be justified in thinking like, well, our tradition is already so complex, you can
yeah.
only fit that much into a curriculum. We're already not teaching everything about the Western tradition. How much can we realistically fit in,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And that's a fair worry. I think that if you're going to be honest about this, you should call your, program Western philosophy and not philosophy. But that's what it is.
mm,
But I think that's a yeah, it's a ongoing problem, and it's not only in philosophy, right? I mean, the way we teach history in the West tends to be very Western centric. The way we teach literature can be and stuff like that. So yeah.
mm. So you mentioned African philosophy.
hmm
That's very interesting. I never stopped to think about it. Is there any African philosophy, like interesting African philosophy that you could share?
I have to say I'm not an expert on this, so I would have to point you to some of the materials on my site on the project website.
Mm,
But we actually developed a kind of we call it a reading group blueprint. So the idea is that if you want to start a reading group on a topic that you don't know anything about, we give you like a blueprint for this reading group. And we have one on African philosophy that I can recommend to you. I can send you a link if you want to share it with people as well, or just link to all of the blueprints that we have created. Um, People are welcome to kind of look them up and maybe either read it themselves or create a reading group about this. It's basically a selection of texts on the topic. It's kind of all have short descriptions. They're arranged in a way that makes sense, and there's some questions for discussions that go with those texts. So if you'd be interested, I'd be super happy to share that.
yeah, of course we can leave the
hmm
link in the description below.
hmm
But yeah, like you just opened like a whole subject that I had never stopped to think about. Like for example, the yin yang. You know, like
hmm
that's considered Chinese philosophy as far as I understand it.
Taoist specifically, but yes.
And like how cool and how interesting it would have been to learn that at an early age, because I had philosophy class at school,
hmm
but
Yeah.
that was not in there, you know, like no one taught me that. I learned that later in life through like martial arts and other
hmm
stuff. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool to see that. Like metaphilo okay.
hmm
All right, Sam. So another subject that I was interested in and I'd like to discuss with you a little bit in detail is modern masculinity.
All right. hmm
So, as far as I understand, you did some research on that. You had some opinions on it. So, I personally don't have a lot of opinions on it. So, I'd like very much to hear what you think about it.
That is a very broad question. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, I've been thinking about this for quite a while, and it's one of those things in which I would like to use my academic knowledge not to kind of do more academic research on this topic, but rather, I don't know, engage people, inspire people to think a bit more, and maybe do, um, I don't know, inspire men to kind of maybe question or like think about how they want to be in the world themselves. I think that a lot of men these days are kind of playing life on autopilot a little bit. Or like, when you like how many times did you ask yourself like what does it mean to be a man to you? And many guys would have answers to this, but like how many of those answers are your answers? How many of those answers are just the sort of thing that the movies tell you, that your pals expect of you, that your dad told you, or whatever else? And how many of those answers are actually you sitting down and thinking, that's what I want. That's what it means to me. And I think that very few guys actually stop to do this. And it's a shame because this is something that I've picked up from a lot of parallel thoughts that have been done by women, women had this, movement called feminism that's been going on for, almost a couple of centuries now. And you can think about feminism what you want. I really don't care. But the point is, like, it offered women an opportunity to go, like, hey, is this the way we want to live? Like, is this, what does it mean to be a woman? How do we want to, like, be out there in the world? Like, how do we want to perform our femininity? How do we want to, like, what about being a woman is kind of like inborn and it's just the way it is? And what of it, to what have we been socialized? What are the parts that we could change? What are the parts that we like? What are the parts that we don't like? Which of those can we change? Which of those do we have to stick regardless if we like them or not, right? It's lots of questions. And women have been absolutely fantastic at actually looking at those questions and answering them and going like, there are some things that um, so Judith Butler had this great distinction between sex and gender that is pretty common right now. So we think about gender as distinct from the sex that, or the sex that you've been born with. So you've been born male, female, or androgynous, and but your gender is the way you express it, right? So it might be that you are a very, I know, feminine man, so your gender might be more feminine than your actual sex. You might be, I know, a butch lesbian, and then you're a very masculine woman, for example, or something like that. So then your gender expression would be different from the sex that you have been assigned at birth. And women have done a lot of thinking of like, okay, what are the social expectations that we have had of women, how women should behave, how women should talk, how women should work, how women should spend their time and all that. Like we have all of those expectations and they are of women as like the sex women, right? So women, so people who have been born with vaginas, right? That's it. But the thing is, those women decide how they present themselves. They decide to perform their femininity. They decide to perform their gender and be, for example, more feminine, or they decide not to be. They decide to do some of the things that we think of when we think of femininity, like, care about their physical appearance a lot, like be motherly, be caring towards other people, pleasing people, be, agree to be the sort of people who take care of the household, that sort of thing, right? These are the sort of things that we associate traditionally with femininity. And they can decide to do them, or they can go like, I don't fancy doing that. I fancy being something else. Yeah. And women have been thinking about this for at least a century right now, right? And men haven't. And I find this preposterous. I find it honestly just really weird that guys don't quite as often stop and think like, how do I want to be? Like, do I want to do all of those things that are typically associated with masculinity? Do I want to, and when you, like, I've been walking around asking those questions. It's just like, which parts of what is typically masculine, guys, do you actually don't really care about? And it turns out that like half the guys don't care about, there's like those kind of shallow level of things. Like they're not interested in sports. They couldn't care less about sports cars, for example, right? They like DIY. No, I really don't fancy doing any of that. I'll just hire someone to do this, right? So there's like those masculine things that typically are associated with, being a man. And people just go like, no, I actually don't want to do them. But then there are other things as well, which have to do with, for example, seeking status, right? Or wanting to place yourself in a hierarchy, really caring how you are perceived in the hierarchy of other men, right? Do you care about this, you personally? For example, how do you resolve conflict? It's a masculine or traditionally masculine thing to, turn to violence in resolving conflict, or potentially being at least ready to, use the threat of force to resolve conflict. Is this your thing? Should it be? Like, is this the sort of thing that you want to do? Like, do we even want it as a society, for example? And there's like a million other questions of that sort of thing. What is your relation, for example, to your emotions, right? Men are taught to be very stoic. Men are taught to really control their emotions. I think that very often they really overdo it, and rather than controlling them, they kind of sweep them under the carpet, and like they don't really control those emotions. They just pretend they don't have them. And but like, is this the way you want to be? Maybe not. And I just think that it's so the project that I've been trying to develop is to inspire men to actually think about that and go like, hey, I know that society gives me all of those blueprints for how to be a man. Is that me? Like, do I want that?
Hmm.
Or do I want to be, do it differently? Because I think it's fair enough. If you want to do it differently, do it differently. I think, enjoy the spoils of modernity because this is what the modern world is all about. It gives people the freedoms that they didn't have in the past. And I think that, it's so important that guys know this and potentially, embrace it. And I'd like to do some writing that could inspire people to do that.
Hmm. So when it comes to the woman's side, it's called feminism.
Hmm.
When it comes to the men's side, how it's called?
No, that's it. We don't really have a good name. Yeah, it's a shame. There should be some sort of men's movement, name. I know, masculism. Sounds weird, doesn't it?
All right, but yeah, that's for sure. It needs a name because you're not the first one to raise this problem. I think. Are you familiar with the work of Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as I understand, he also preaches something similar. He says like men nowadays. I'm paraphrasing. Okay,
Hmm.
men nowadays are lost and they really don't know who they are, what they want to be,
Yeah.
and I think it aligns very well with what you just said.
Yeah, so I think that Jordan Peterson is really good at identifying the problems that men are struggling with. I think he is spot on with a lot of things. And he actually talks, his whole like 12 rules for life is the subtitle I think is the map through chaos or something like something about like finding your way through chaos. Um, and uh, and this is what we've been talking about already, right? That the world seems so chaotic. It seems like so much is changing and all that, that people are a bit lost and people need a bit of structure. And this is definitely something that is affecting men today because there has been so many social changes that have basically left men going like, wow, like what am I even for? Like, what do we even need men for these days? Or like how, like what should I be doing with my life? And I think this is a very good diagnosis. Like Jordan Peterson is very good at pointing out that so many people are lost and so many people struggle with various things that those kind of changes have brought with them. So loneliness is one of the biggest problems that so many men struggle with today. Um, so kudos to him on this. I think that the solutions he provides, though, I just think he's outdated. I just think that he is, an old man from Alberta or wherever he is from, and he's kind of trying to give us solutions that worked back in his day. I don't really think they do anymore.
What kind of
Um,
solutions is he proposing?
well, he's effectively promoting this, what I think is a bit of an outdated model of masculinity. He still wants to double back on this, you know, be a, he still wants to double back on things to do with hierarchies, for example, or finding your place in the hierarchy. This whole like lobster ladder that he's got in the book is all about this. And he wants to, convince men to follow with this kind of protector provider model of masculinity. And I think that and I think he's just not very kind to women, I think that he's just not acknowledging the sort of struggles that women have been going through and some of the valid grievances that they've got. He's also got this really weird suggestion that we should have what state mandated wives or something like this, and I understand where he's coming to this. He goes on about how having too many single men is kind of socially or politically difficult because that tends to be a very dangerous and disgruntled demographic, and that leads to a lot of social problems, potentially wars and other things like that. So his solution to this is we should just assign them wives, which is, like
No, he said that.
who, well, I mean, I'm simplifying a little bit, but it's it's he basically advocates for a return to a more kind of traditional family model in which basically people do pair for life in this sort of way. Not like realistically, not the state comes in and gives you a wife or something like that, but that, we should return to a family model in which basically, people had this, like people were paired up in this way. And I think that it's just not like, how about you ask the women if they want that, How about you ask people if they actually want this? And if I don't think that it's, you know, right to propose these sort of models because, well, it just doesn't take into account, the, I don't know, the humanity of women as well. And I think that this is unfortunately some of the ways in which I think he goes wrong. I think that this whole like doubling
When
down
did
on
he
the,
propose that? Do you know? Like you have a
I'll need to look it up right now. Mm,
So did he propose men, lonely men, single men who just get assigned wives?
well, not, and he talks about enforced monogamy. I can send you there's a thing about, that's it, yeah. So there's something about enforced monogamy that he has been writing about. Maybe find this term specifically.
Forced monogamy. Okay.
Yeah,
Jordan Peterson.
yeah. But the point is, it's like some of those things just seem like he he thinks that there was a time when things just worked and it was okay. And he kind of wants a return to that sort of time. And I think that's inaccurate because I think it mostly worked for men. It didn't necessarily work for women. And B is just the world has changed. And I don't think you can paddle back history. I don't think you can realistically go back to some, golden age, even if it existed, because the world just isn't what it is. And we cannot really, find the same sort of thing that we had in the past. And I think that this whole idea um, with men seeing themselves as protectors and providers and all that, and especially providers, is a case in point because it's just not needed in the modern world. Women can provide for themselves perfectly well, and there's not that many dangers that men need to protect
So,
anyone
Sam,
from.
before we go
Hmm.
in there, I just want you
Yeah.
to watch this clip real
I
quick.
guess they call themselves incels, involuntary.
So this is a video from on YouTube where
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson talks about enforced monogamy on the
Hmm.
Joe Rogan podcast. Yeah.
All
Celibates.
right.
When all this stuff went down, when this guy drove his car into a group of people, it's horrible tragedy. One of the things that you talked about with incels is that, and this was a part of the what was it? It was a New
By the way, can you hear it?
No, I can't hear. I can see it, but not hear it.
Oh damn.
York
Okay.
Times hit piece. Yeah.
Okay. So let's not go through it. But they start talking about incels, like
Hmm.
men on prison. I don't know where they're going with it. So
Hmm.
I'm sorry if you cannot hear. Let's just drop it. We can.
Right.
I will try to fix it for next time, everyone.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, basically, the idea is that, there should be measures, either government measures or some other measures that effectively, tie women to marriages, even if they're unhappy in those marriages. Even by restricting divorce, for example, or by, restricting some other ways in which they could get out of those marriages. So it's not literally like, assign every man a wife, something like this. But it's, effectively some sort of measures
okay.
that, like enforce that people stay in relationships, right? That is not so easy to get out of them, especially for women. Um, and I think that once again, it's kind of not really taking into account the autonomy of the women. And he might argue that it's a acceptable cost for the sake of preventing, the social unrest that would happen if we have too many single males or something like this. But I we just need to find a better system. It's one of those, there needs to be some better way to do this than that. Um,
When it comes
yeah,
to partnering up, like men and women coming together, there must be a. That's what you mean?
well, or at least a better way to ensure that men and women do come together or want to form relationships rather than forcing it. I think that forcing it is just not
Well, well, Simon, if there's one thing that
mhm.
I think we should not control and will never be able to control, oops,
Yeah.
is how people relate to each other.
Yeah.
How attraction, romantic attraction works. If there's a spark, there's a spark. If two human beings want to be together, they're gonna be together. I don't think there's a system that needs to be changed there. It's just the only problem that I have with is abuse in relationships,
Hmm.
when abuse is not recognized and it keeps going on, then like an intervention needs to happen. But other than that, I don't think there must be a system or a system should be changed.
Well, I think that right now we are, heading towards a system that allows people this sort of freedom. But, let's not forget that historically, this is not how the world was structured, right? I mean, I know from my own family members, for privacy reason, I'm not going to say who exactly, but like I do have family members of a, couple generations past who have been in a very unhappy and frankly abusive relationship, and they never broke up because in that time having a divorce was just unacceptable. And they were really unhappy. And they still didn't do that because it was just so socially unacceptable, and in their social class it would absolutely be unacceptable that they stuck with it. And frankly, in many ways, wasted their lives in this way. So we absolutely did have a system in place which enforced this. And I
No,
think it's a fantastic achievement of modernity right now that, we don't, and that people are free to make those decisions. So I think that, yeah, it would be wrong to go back to something like this.
yeah, but I don't think we are going back. It's just not how nowadays. It's totally acceptable to
Hmm.
have a divorce, two divorces, three divorces. Is not a problem anymore. So
Yeah. No, I don't think we are, but I think that this is the implication of what Peterson is talking about,
I
right?
see. Okay,
On this, yeah.
I got it. Okay, okay,
Hmm.
okay. All right. So going back to modern masculinity, so we
Hmm.
don't have a name for it yet. Let's call it modern masculinity.
Sure.
Men, so historically speaking, let me formulate my question.
Yeah. Hmm.
Historically speaking, men always had a role. He was the provider, right?
Hmm.
But nowadays, because women can work, they have way more autonomy. They can vote. It's a completely different era. Men are start to question what is their role in the relationship or the role in society as a man.
Yeah.
So one of those questions is, so I'm not the provider. Who is the provider? What would be the other questions that men are asking themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is exactly what Peterson is great at. He identifies those problems. This is
Okay,
definitely it. Because like you say, in the modern world, women can provide for themselves just fine. And similarly with the role of men as protectors, right? They
protectors.
would like
Okay,
to see themselves as protecting us from various sorts of dangers. I wrote an article at some point about this, just looking at like what are the actual chances that you will get attacked by, I don't know, the sort of things that men like to think of themselves as protecting us from.
a
So
bear.
really serious, yeah. So like, I don't know, attacks of vicious beasts or attacks of terrorists or like a natural disaster or something like this, or even street violence, that sort of stuff, right? And the thing is that, say for street violence, that's the most likely thing. But those other things is just like you've got some like 0.0000001% chance, that this will happen to you in your lifetime. So if we have all of those men training really hard to protect us from things that never happen, there's just lots of wasted potential, right? But there's lots of other things that can still happen that are much more dangerous. And I think that I don't think that men as protectors and providers is completely defunct. It's gone. I just think that men should really rethink, and this is what I mean, that men should really sit down and think about, what it means to be a man. Men should rethink what is it that they're protecting from and what is it that they're providing. Because I think that there's plenty of things that people struggle with today that they need protection from. I don't want to protect my partner from bear attacks and from, Vikings raiding our flat or something like this, right? But when their boss is an absolute bitch to her and she comes back home feeling horrible because she's been really treated really badly at work or something like this, then I feel like I need to protect her, but I don't want to like it's not like I'm gonna go to her job and punch her boss in the face, right? That's not the sort of protecting I'm going to do. No, I'm going to protect her by providing a space in which she can regain her strength, right? I'm going to protect by rebuilding her strength so she can go back. I'm going to protect her to, develop the sort of skills that the next time she goes there, she can actually protect herself. Yeah. If, for example, a friend of mine is having a, I know, anxious mental breakdown or something like this because of whatever, things are happening in their life, or is depressed or something like this, I'm going to, talk to them and protect them from their own brains that are trying to spin horrible stories in their brains, right? I'm going to protect them from, bad thoughts. I'm going to protect them from like horror scenarios that are playing in their minds and these sort of things. So these are the sort of things that like they happen every day. Like bear attacks don't happen every day, but those things, they happen every day. So if you want to be a protector, I think it's useful to think of it in those terms. What are the actual dangers that people are facing that you can help protect them from? But it's not only this. It's like so many people are suffering from, you know, real social difficulties that they find themselves in, ranging from poverty, right, to some sort of, I don't know, mental illness or other things like this, and they need help. They need protection. They need protection from, exploitative corporations. They need protection from, I know, difficult life circumstances. They need protection from people who would exploit them in one way or another, right? And men can absolutely be protectors in this sense. Protect people from, yeah, corporate greed. That's the sort of thing that happens every day.
Yeah, but come
If
on.
you if you think of also the sort of things that we've been talking about with respect to AI, right, or with respect to the technological changes, well, we should absolutely protect each other and protect the world from those things. We should protect them ourselves from really bad decisions on a, potentially global scale being done for the sake of earning a few more bucks on your AI. And how do we protect people from this? Well, we, become activists. We go and work with the government to develop laws that protect us from this. We develop, some sort of social movements that act against this and that sort of stuff. And I understand that none of those things have, the glory of dashing into a scene with a sword to save a princess from a dragon or something like that. But just be real, like protect people from things they actually need protecting from. So I think that's like one thing that is potentially like something for people to think about.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, modern masculinity, in your eyes, um, modern men could ask more what it means to be a man, and one of the things could be your role as a protector on society or in a relationship.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's one of those things. But like I think that at the end of the day, every one of us needs to ask himself those questions. And like going back to Plato that we mentioned before, and so Plato wrote all of those dialogues, and the main character in the dialogues is Socrates. And Socrates says at some point that an unexamined life is not worth living, and that you should know thyself. You should really think about who it is that you are and examine your life and think what it is that you want in your life, what brings meaning to your life, and all that. And I highly encourage all men to do exactly that, because I think that we are playing from those scripts in which what defines us is that somebody somewhere millennia ago said that men should be protectors and providers. And like right now, maybe it's not what really befits the modern world, right? Maybe it's not what you want. And the question is, what is it that you want? And I really like I don't know, do you like rock and punk music? Do you know Rage Against the Machine?
Mm-hmm.
They've got this fantastic song "Killing in the Name of," and like that's it's like the whole last line of it is just like "fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me," and it's this like rebellion against people just telling you how you should live your life. Well, fuck them. Don't live your life the way other people tell you to live your life. Decide how you want to live your life yourself. It's like, why should it be that we have those like received models of how to be a man, and that we should like tick those boxes, and if you tick those boxes, then you're a good man, we will approve of you, you'll climb the lobster ladder, and whatever else. And it's like, no, like think of it like, what do you actually want for life? Because chances are that if you tick all of those boxes, you will still end up unhappy, because you will just really well fulfill things that don't make you happy, that you don't care about, that you just do because someone told you to do, and not because they are actually meaningful to you. And I think it's so important that men actually stop and try to know themselves, like Socrates would say, know yourself, know what it is that works for you. And maybe what matters for you is that you really give something to your community by, for example, yeah, fighting corporate greed or something like this. And there's so many other ways to be a man that are kind of tied to traditional masculinities, being a great leader, right? Being someone who sacrifices himself for the good of other people, that sort of thing. Being like the sort of person who is a shield against adversity. Being the sort of person who shares his wealth and is really generous with other people. These are fantastic ways to be masculine. And I think one of the better ways as well that men should think of, like how to be a good masculine man these days, is to take a lot of those traditionally masculine virtues, such as strength, for example, or like confidence, or honor, or authority, things like this, and share them. Don't keep them for yourself, but find a community that you can lead, that you can be a part of, and that you can also teach how to have those things. Don't be strong for the sake of your strength. No, teach other people how to be strong. Teach other people how to be confident, teach other people, how to have honor and other things like this.
Simon, that's beautiful, and I couldn't
Hmm.
agree more. But I need to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Hmm. Go,
Why
go.
why would you limit those incredible qualities, being generous with your money, trying to help the world be a better place, to
Hmm.
men? So you mentioned several times this
Hmm.
is what would help men maybe become better men. But why? But the way I see it, they also apply to women.
Absolutely. I would not disagree with that at all. In fact, I think that like this is exactly what I mean by sharing as well. Just say, those are not things that like, you don't need to have a penis in order to have honor, right? You can have honor regardless. You don't need, or to have strength or anything else. Or clearly you don't need it to provide and protect, right? Because women can provide for themselves just fine, and they make great police women as well, who do great protecting. So clearly that is all absolutely possible, and that's exactly I think what I mean as well when I say that like those things have been traditionally associated with men, not necessarily fairly, but that's what it was. But right now, the great thing that modern men can do is take all those things that have been, traditionally masculine and actually share them with everyone else. I don't think men should keep those for themselves. I think it's fantastic if we can share them.
Mm, mm. Beautiful.
Hmm.
Couldn't agree more. Simon, is there anything else that you like to cover or
Hmm.
talk about? Any final remarks?
Um, I don't know. I think that maybe, would you be interested in, no, we already talked about AIs as well and all that. We already talked about this. I think that what I would really like to maybe mention to people right now is that like I think that one of the things that men are like one of the problems that men have right now, and one of the ways in which a lot of men are shooting themselves in the foot, I think, in many discussions, is that they don't really allow themselves to not be awesome all the time. to fail or to be a bit weak or have some like problem or something like that. And I think that it's a very masculine thing, right? You always need to project strength and you always need to be on top and you cannot allow anyone to see your weakness or anything like this. But I think that a lot of the time when men like have genuine problems, like really struggle with their loneliness, they struggle with mental health, they struggle with other things, they first of all don't really admit it to many people, which is already means that they don't get help, but also they get in discussions with either women or with other people, and in those discussions, rather than kind of say like, "Hey, I'm struggling," it's okay to struggle. It's fine. You're allowed to have problems. They kind of don't allow themselves to have those problems, and they feel like I cannot look weak, therefore I cannot just, say I'm feeling bad for being lonely or something like that. No, I need to like get angry about it. I need to blame someone for it. I need to like and then you get a lot of kind of very problematic discussions that people have. But I think that when men do that, they effectively just shoot themselves in the foot because if they just said, "Hey, I'm struggling, I need help," they would get help. But if they get angry, if they get, start a blame game, start trying to prove that it's somebody else's fault and all this, people don't want to help them. Like, why would you want to help a person who's being a dick to you, right? People don't want to help them. And I think it's a great shame because so often I see that women or feminists or other people kind of downplay the problems that men struggle with. They downplay, go like, "Ah, you're a privileged man, and why do you even have any problems? That's ridiculous." Like, "Oh no, your loneliness, whatever. How is your loneliness as bad as I don't know the rape culture or something like this, right?" And uh, and they get really defensive about this, and it starts this kind of blame game. It starts this, constant fighting of like, "Oh no, my problems are bigger than your problems. No, my problems are bigger than your problems." And people fight over this. And if instead of this fighting, men kind of found in themselves the ability to just go like, "Wait, I don't need to fight about this. I can just like admit, I've got a problem and I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. It's fine." And, so many men, for example, you know that men have so much higher a chance to die by suicide, but at the same time, men are so much less likely to seek help for depression, right? Men are very often underdiagnosed for depression as well. And this is because they they still feel like they need to project this sort of strength and they cannot ask for help. They cannot seem weak. They cannot go like, "It's okay that I'm struggling." And instead, they drive themselves into depression lower and lower, and potentially that can end tragically as well. I think that this would be like one big thing that I would really encourage all men who want to pursue this way and actually try to know themselves and try to ask those questions of what it is like, what it means to be a man, to also ask themselves, well, maybe it's okay to not be perfect and strong and powerful all the time because that's just life. We all struggle sometimes. And, if you struggle and you try to push through it and put all of your problems under the carpet, it's gonna come back and bite you. Like it's like you can bottle it up, but at some point it's gonna explode. And if it explodes, you're probably gonna harm other people, but you're also going to harm yourself. And it's such a shame because instead of seeking this help and actually talking to people and admitting, "Hey, this is difficult, I've got a problem," men act in this way that just makes everyone else want to hate them, right? They have a genuine problem, they genuinely need help, but people don't want to help them and try to prove to them that their problems are unimportant because of how we bring those problems up. We bring them up in such an aggressive way often.
I mean, if you pay a therapist, they will help you, regardless.
Absolutely.
So
And
you're
like,
just looking for help on the wrong places, basically.
well, yeah, but I mean, so often those problems are not necessarily as bad as to require a therapist, right?
All right.
So,
Okay.
of course, I would absolutely encourage everyone who has, more serious psychological problems to absolutely seek therapy. If it's not that bad, perhaps you can seek coaching or something like this.
Mm.
That's fair enough. But a lot of the time, all you need is just to talk to a friend or talk to your partner or something like this.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
totally. Where do you think this expectation of perfection comes from?
Yeah, I think that men are just really good at policing each other, unfortunately. Like if you're admitting to weakness, the dudes will laugh, or that your bros will make you feel like you're less than, or other people will
Mm.
make you feel crap for it. And it's a very effective way of policing. And I think that unfortunately we are still in a culture in which boys learn that very early on. Like if you're the weak boy, some bully is gonna come and beat you up. And then we kind of bring it into our later lives. And I think so often, there's I won't quote Yoda properly, but there's this whole thing about, fear leads to anger, anger leads to the dark side and all that. Um, but it's so true. Like a lot of the time, men are so, when men are angry and violent, I think that 90% of the time, they're actually afraid of something. They're actually trying to prove that they are not weak and they need to project so much strength. So they will, kick someone to show everyone how strong they are so that nobody wants to mess with them or something like that. And, but really, what's going on is that they're afraid that someone will mess with them, right? So I think that so often, unfortunately, the dark side that men have is underpinned, as in Star Wars, by fear. And we should get better at resolving our fears without violence, without kicking other people. And frankly, like I said in this whole like long thing, is we should just be okay with just being afraid sometimes. The world is a very chaotic and scary place sometimes, and it's okay that we're sometimes a bit afraid of it.
What? You're telling people to feel their feelings?
I
Are
know,
are you
shocking, right?
crazy? I cannot do that.
I know, it's so unmanly. Well, that's what I mean. It's just I think that we have inherited those notions of what men should be like, and I think that many of those notions are just outdated, really badly outdated, and like men can absolutely have like men do have feelings and just like get used to it. Stop pretending we don't. It's just such a like and it's it's really funny because like when you read ancient epics, have you read the Iliad, for example, by Homer?
What is
It's
Iliad? I'm not
but
familiar.
it's this ancient epic about the Trojan War in which the greatest hero Achilles is like he is this basically the ancient superhero, ancient Greek superhero, right? And he spends half the first chapter crying, right? Because like he is so expressive of his emotions all the time because he's really pissed off by certain injustices that happened to him during this war. He feels he's wronged, he's abandoning the Greek army. He says he won't fight for them. The Greeks start losing, the Trojans are beating them because Achilles has left and he was the superhero of the whole thing. So the Greeks then the whole story starts from the Greeks sending an envoy to Achilles to beg him to please come back. And he's just really sad and really annoyed with him. And like the whole thing is about this like the greatest hero, and he has so many emotions about all of this. And somehow this was just completely normal to the ancient Greeks. And somehow now we have just lost it over the centuries. And I think it's a great shame because, it's just like denying yourself the full experience of life. Why would we do that? Life
Hmm.
is so much richer. And I'm not saying that, like, because I totally agree that there is great value to being able to control your emotions and to not be, driven by emotions all the time. I think that's fantastic. And there is a great deal to be said for Stoicism, which so many men want to embrace right now as a kind of like way of life. But Stoicism is so badly misinterpreted. When you actually read Marcus Aurelius, who was the Roman emperor who wrote a lot about Stoicism. He was the follower of Stoicism and like one of the greatest examples of actually applying Stoic principles to rulership and to life. Like he does not deny himself emotions. He controls his emotions. He allows himself to feel all of them, but then he takes charge of them. It's not that he never feels sad. It's not that he never grieves or that he never feels, whatever other emotion. No, it's just that he allows himself to feel them, but then he masters them. He is able to channel them in such a way that they're useful. He's able to use them in such a way that, they are there for the common good. Whereas right now, when people talk about Stoicism, they often like pretend like as this just don't allow yourself to feel any emotions. Just it's kind of sweeping them under the carpet, and then you end up in the situation that I mentioned before, which is that if you bottle something up for long enough and it ferments, at some point it's going to explode. And because we have been living in this culture in which men are generally allowed to show one emotion, and that's anger, well, that's how it usually explodes. It explodes in anger. And then, well, anger tends to lead to the dark side. So harm happens, I guess.
Yeah, but not only that. I guess like other men also will not respect a leader who is crying all the time, you know? Like
Mm.
unfortunately, yeah. So how my question would be how would you recommend men to feel their emotions? Like do you have like a practice, a habit, like a technique?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right that you cannot have a situation in which a leader, is crying all the time. I
Yeah.
think that's probably true. Um, I think that when people see somebody who struggles but manages to conquer those struggles and come out stronger at the end,
Mm, mm-hmm.
that is not weakness, right? If you are if you're struggling but you end up in control, that is strength. And I think that this is something that I would encourage all men to do as well. Is just like don't try to hide or, like I say, sweep under the carpet the things that you're struggling with, but actually try to address them. So here is an example I can give you. I went through, I had a partner with whom I was for almost 8 years. It was a fantastic partnership, and then we decided to split up. And I had so many feels about this. I was grieving for quite some time, and I was feeling really, really down. And for a few weeks, I was really struggling. But then I was able to kind of get on top of it because I have done some therapy already before. I was already able to kind of recognize my own emotions. I knew that I need to, for example, I cannot skip this time in which I need to grieve because something bad has happened, and just pretending it didn't happen and just going on doesn't give justice to how important it was. You need to grieve a loss. So I allowed myself some time to grieve. But then I also knew that my head is likely to get stuck in loops of thinking about the same thing over and over again, right? To kind of keep ruminating over how good things were and how bad is it that they're not here anymore. So I knew that I need to remind myself that my head is doing this. And journaling is a fantastic way to do that because when you write something down, it leaves your head. You stop need to think about it. And even if you keep thinking about it, you write it down again, you write it down again, and then you come back to your journal and go like, crap, I've been writing the same thing every single page. Like I need to let this go. And you might not realize this when it's only in your head, because when it's only in your head, then you kind of wake up the next day and you don't really remember what was going yesterday. But when it's written down, you can look it up and you go like, crap, this is what I've been thinking all this time. I need to do something about this. So it's a helpful technique, for example. I really recommend that people engage in rituals. So many psychologists have written how important is it that we have something that in a very ritualistic way creates a boundary. So our ancestors used to have lots of rituals, right? You would have a ritual of passage for young boys becoming men, for example, and things like that. We still have some rituals, such as graduation, but a lot of the time we just got rid of them. And I think that like when you have these sort of changes in life, it's so difficult to just find this one moment in which you tell yourself, all right, from today on, I'm a new person. Or from today on, I'm letting go of those, bad thoughts. From today on, the grieving period ends and I can move on, right? But if you create a ritual for yourself, right, something that you do that is like physically makes you feel like a change has happened, then it really psychologically helps you. So I was quite lucky because for me, this change was happening in the spring. And I was born in Poland, so I'm Slavic. There's a old Slavic ritual of the first day of spring called the burning of Marzanna. Marzanna is a winter goddess. She is like in the Slavic pantheon, she was the goddess of cold, death, and winter and everything else. And on the first day of spring, the Slavs would create a wicker figure, a wicker representation of her, dress her up in a dress and so stuff like that, and burn her and throw her into the river so she floats away, right? And this was basically to represent that like we are done with winter. We don't want this anymore. And it's such a fantastic opportunity to say like, okay, I'm done with this. Like today, I'm making this ritual. And this ritual is not like, I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in any of this, right? No, this ritual is a commitment to myself. Like I'm making a promise to myself, right? And this burning thing is a physical representation of me making a promise that some things can go away now. I don't need to think about them anymore, right? And this is, for example, a way that I use to help myself process my own emotions, right? So here's some examples that I think might be useful to you or the listeners, right? So if you think of like how do we actually process our emotions or how do we express them or something like that, well, that's how. And I don't think that any of my friends or any people I know would come to me and call me, weak or not follow my lead or something like that because I struggled after this breakup, right? No, I had a real reason to be sad. I gave myself time to grieve because I recognized that it's important. And then I did what I could to get past it, to conquer this feeling, to master this feeling and move on. And it's not that this feeling is some sort of like skeleton in my closet right now, swept under the carpet or in a jar waiting to explode or something like that. No, I have processed it, right? I have taken care of it, and now it's gone. It has floated down the river with this Majanna, right?
Hmm.
So, for example, this is something that I think more men should think about when they think about emotions. It's not this like, oh no, you're gonna be so weak and emotional. No, this means that when you actually accept and understand those emotions, you can process them better.
Hmm. And some techniques would be therapy, journaling, rituals, and
Hmm.
this is great, man. Great stuff. But what about the smaller? I don't want to call them smaller emotions.
Hmm.
Let's call it them less intense emotions because a breakup it's very
Sure.
intense, very intense. But
Hmm.
let's say you're just stressed out because the day sucked. Like
Hmm.
how would you process? I'm not burning stuff and throwing it in the river every night just because I want to
Yeah.
process like some less intense emotions. Do you have like recommendations or techniques for less intense emotions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I like to be very scientific about those things. And there's good neuroscience background um, for example, breathing exercises for stress. So we know, for example, that when you're really stressed, right, that means that a lot of adrenaline and cortisol is being released in your body. One of the simple ways to get those levels down is to engage in, it's two types of breathing. One is this kind of like continuous deep breathing, but like breathe continuously like this for like a minute, something like that. And another one is called the psychological sigh. And a psychological sigh is when you breathe in through your nose as deep as you can. Then at the top, you breathe in just a little bit more, and then you release for a long time through your mouth. And when you do that several times in a row, that engages what it's called your parasympathetic nervous system. Your parasympathetic nervous system is the part of your nervous system that is responsible for calming you down and putting you to sleep. Your sympathetic nervous system is the kind of fight and flight system. That's the cortisol and adrenaline. That's the sort of thing that when a tiger jumps out at you, you it engages it, and then you start, you're able to respond. We have evolved to run away from tigers. We have not evolved to experience that sort of stress. But now we are experiencing so much more stress in various other forms in the workplace and all that. And our nervous systems are still the same nervous systems that we evolved with, right? So they still react in the same way. So when you are stressed, we know what are the kind of brain functions that happen then, and we know what we can do to limit them. So for example, breathing techniques are an excellent way to kind of calm yourself down. But it's also important to remember that once again, it's not like sweeping the emotion under the carpet. No, it's like recognizing that you are stressed, right? You need to at this moment go I'm stressed, or I'm stressed because of this. Like recognize your own emotion. And then people also say that I think there's some window of like a couple minutes or something like this when you're just so flooded with cortisol and adrenaline that you just can't do anything about this. It's just going to be in your system. So you need to allow yourself a few minutes of just actually feeling this emotion, right? Just be stressed for a moment, and then do the breathing, for example, and that calms you down. But that requires that you recognize your own emotions, and that you, for example, go okay, I'm not going to react to this by blaming all of the people who made me feel stressed. I'm not going to get angry and start fighting back at them, because that's counterproductive. In the end, you're probably just going to make enemies, right? No, I am going to recognize, okay, I'm stressed now. I need to recognize this emotion, and here is a technique I can use to control it. And that is a really stoic thing to do, actually. This is what stoicism should be about. It's about, it's not about not having emotions. It's about having them, but then mastering them.
Man, that's incredible. Why? I genuinely don't understand why those things are not like we don't learn those things at school. Like it's so
Yeah, that's a good
human.
question.
It's so it feels so fundamental and basic that it should be taught in schools. It's like how to be a human, basically. How to understand yourself and navigate through life. Like those are the things that the children should be learning. Of course, all the other stuff as well. But
Yeah.
how would you call of this? Like emotion intelligence? I heard this term several times. Emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah, like emotional intelligence is a term that is often floated. And yeah, I think it's a good name for it, absolutely. I would absolutely encourage, I don't know, so many guys feel like, oh, that's such a wishy-washy thing, it's unmanly or whatever else. Just go dude, what are your emotions, Your emotions are basically your brain's thought shortcuts or quick ways to signal to you how you should act, right? We don't have, in our everyday life, we don't have time when we are attacked by a tiger or something like that to carefully deliberate, oh, what are the pros and cons of escaping right now and all that. No, this is why we evolved emotions, because when you feel fear, you're going to react right now and you're going to save your life, and this is evolutionarily good for you. And all of the other emotions are like that as well. When you feel disgust at something that is yucky, and you're about to eat it, you're not going to eat it because you have this emotion. Whereas, if you had to deliberate, oh, is that the same sort of berry that I found already then, or is it a slightly different color, and blah, 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 then you would, already have died 5 times because you poison yourself with something that's been off or whatever else. So I think it's really useful for guys also to think that emotions aren't some sort of wishy-washy thing. No, they're your brain telling you something. They're your brain telling you that this is good, this is bad, this is something you should want, this is something you should avoid, that sort of stuff. And it's just your brain is telling you some things in the form of thoughts or beliefs or whatever else, and it's telling you some things in the form of emotions. And you should listen to your brain, I guess.
Oh, beautiful. Someone once told me like the emotions is like when you have a ball, you're like on the swimming pool and you have a ball and you're trying to push it down the water.
Yep.
No matter what you do, no matter how much you push it, the ball wants to come out. It wants to get out of the water. And if you keep trying, like at some point, doesn't matter. At some point, the ball will just come. And it will come so hard if you keep trying, and it's gonna just explode in your face, and it's gonna hurt you. So just let it come to the surface gently. That's the best you can do, But yeah.
Well, that's what I mean with the kind of mastering your emotions, right? That's exactly mastering your emotions means, keeping control of this ball and letting it come out to the surface gently.
Yeah, beautiful. Simon, is there anything else that you'd like to cover? Any final remarks?
No, I think it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoy it. All right, so thank you, everyone. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast will be recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. Check out now the BruCast store, Explorer store, filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BruCast. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Buy now at bru-cast.com/store. I repeat, bru-cast.com/store. All links on the description below. BruCast is also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, BruCast on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Links below. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Simon. See you next time. Bye-bye. All right. So how was it, man?